All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Nights for the North. So this is our lunchtime talk, artist talk with Sarah Tabbert. I'm Kristen here at the Northern Center. And as a few more people arrive, I'm going to go ahead and invite you to sit back and relax or get up and dance as I share some music by Tim Easton.
Greetings, friends. This is Tim Easton checking in from Nashville, Tennessee, wishing everybody at the Northern Center a happy 50th anniversary. This song is for you. It's called Northbound. There's a lot of money tied up in your town. Plenty more people with their knees on the ground. Can't help but wonder when the whole thing is gonna burn down. Well, when I start to thinking I can't hang around, I'm northbound. Too many people with too many cars. They're going back to spend some mud on the tires. I'm tired of the pavement, the noise and all the grind. I want to talk to somebody who doesn't care when I'm driving northbound. No road to Amberlake. I'm not talking about Tennessee, Louisiana, Texas, even Mississippi. All the people down there have always been good to me. But Montana, Washington, Alaska, and BC have my heart. That's why I'm northbound. There's a lot of money tied up in your town. Plenty more people with their knees on the ground. I can't help but wonder when the whole thing is gonna burn down. Well, when I start to thinking I can't hang around, I'm northbound. They might not want you to know it, that's where I'm going, northbound. Not in a bad mood, I'm just in Washington, D.C. Not in a bad mood, I'm just in D.C. Hey, not in a bad mood, I'm just in D.C. Thanks for raising awareness, everybody.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I love Tim Easton. That was great. So again, welcome everyone to Nights for the North talk with Sarah Tabbert. I'm Kristen here at the Northern Center, and I want to start off by acknowledging that we work throughout the unceded territories of the Indigenous peoples of Alaska, and our office is located on the traditional territories of the Lower Tanana Dene Athabascan peoples. I want to honor the ancestral ongoing land and water stewardship and place-based knowledge of the peoples of this territories. So go ahead and pop in the chat where you're calling in from. And we're going to use the chat today for comments and questions. So you'll have an opportunity at the end to take yourself off mute. But for now, I just want to be respectful of everyone's time and stay on mute and see some. So yeah, the chat button's down at the bottom there. You can look at the, there's a link for finding out what native land you live on. All right, so my guest today is Sarah Tabbert. Sarah is a printmaker and mixed media artist from here in Fairbanks. I'm most familiar with her installation at the UAF Mary building titled Channel. It is this massive 2-story wood panel artwork that she carved and painted by hand. And Sarah is the 2021 featured artist for the Northern Center and has created some truly beautiful wood panels for us. Besides her work here in the state, she has been an artist in residence throughout the National Park Service, including Denali, Zion, Isle Royale, and the Chilkoot Trail, as well as internationally in Canada, Italy, and Argentina. Her next adventure is a 9-week fellowship in Windgate ITE program at the Center for Art in Wood in Philadelphia. So welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to go through the process of sharing my screen, and I hope that this goes smoothly. I have had the good fortune of not being on Zoom very much in the last few months, and previous. Okay.
Well, that's good.
I think we're there. So Kristen asked me to talk a little bit about why I wanted to apply to be the featured artist for this year's celebration of the 50th year of the Northern Center. And I guess I would say in some ways it's personal. I'm a little less than a year older than the Northern Center. And as you can see by this early collaboration, I've been somewhat involved for a long time. My earliest memories of life have a significant category that involves being bored at the office, apparently trusted with some financial statements at an early age. Environmental Center, as it was known then, hosted some fabulous potlucks and also a sadly long gone epic crab and shrimp feed, which were definitely things that made an impact on a kid. My parents were very involved in the early days. I believe my mom was the president for a period of time. And although I can't say that the life and work of an artist or at least the life and work of the artist that I am, leaves a whole lot of time for being much overtly involved with the activities of the Northern Center. I'm always interested in what's going on, and will always be a supporter of the good work that they do. In some ways, as an artist for this project, I'm a little bit less of an obvious choice. I've always been pretty upfront about the fact that my work is not overtly agenda or issue driven. There probably are other artists who can make a more passionate and direct connection between what their work is clearly about and the work of the center. And I hope that all of those artists apply for this opportunity in the future. Personally, I'm somewhat torn between two contradictory mandates of the current art world, which is, in my sense anyway, that your work must have an ideological agenda, and that is preferably from a list that's about 3 items long. Yet at the same time, your work must also be honest. Not everybody sees a conflict between those two things, but often I do, and I've chosen to honor the latter of those two commandments. I think that it's critically important to be a socially and politically involved person. And for some of us, that activity is a bit more distinct from our artwork than others. At the same time, I'm very much an outward-looking, observant artist who's interested in exploring ideas of place and the subtleties of the landscape. I guess if I have a hope for how my work can function in terms of advocacy, and I will admit that I approach this with some skepticism, I hope that my attention to the beauty and endless things of interest, particularly in less loved landscapes, can spark care and stewardship for those places. And also, This may seem a little bit mercenary, but I do recognize that my work has some economic value, and I will happily admit to a certain amount of what I call Robin Hooding, which is using my work to channel economic resources from one direction to another. Organizations and causes need voices to reflect messages, and it's important to give gestures of support and all of the good things that art can do. But they also often need lawyers and lobbyists and things that require straight up cash. And maybe for me, that seems the most pragmatic way that my work can function. Which might make this a good time to remind everyone that there is an auction that's open. And if you are in Fairbanks, you might want to drop by the NAEC offices to take a look in person. My work is particularly difficult to capture in photographs. And these are, if I say so myself, a couple of pretty nice pieces that they have up for auction. Also, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, as I was out of town all summer and my studio burned to the ground in September, as a placeholder in time, these are the last two pieces to come out of that shop. And yes, I will be bidding against you for these pieces. Both of the carved panel pieces that are in the auction contain elements that are frequent characters in my work and neighbors on my property. This is a woodcut print of cotton grass, and I'll just note here that although I am a printmaker, I consider the two areas of work distinct, and so people often want to know if I print off of my carved panel pieces, and the answer to that is no. I could, but given the different kinds of wood that I use for these different pieces and some other considerations, they always exist as two independent things, even though they share some similarities. So these pieces are subjects of study that are obviously related to other work that I've done. This is another wood block print. I often spend a lot of time fussing around with one thing through many pieces before I feel like I've understood it or I'm finished with it. In addition, my work never really travels in a straight line. I've always had two fairly distinct streams to my work, one rooted in observation and a more representational way of working, and the other a much less literal and more intuitive way of working with pattern, shape, and color. These two things diverge and come together, and I don't think that any piece that falls more heavily into one category is devoid of the other. I'm also very loath to let go of scrap or leftovers, and I prefer to make use of them in pieces that employ collage and assembly, such as the last two that I showed you, or reworking and reassembling the blocks that are left over from the printing process. Sometimes there's so much beautiful mark making and leftovers, even though often the way that I print doesn't leave much left on the block by the time that I'm finished. I often work in color, a process called color reduction, where you're continually carving and printing and carving and printing off of the same piece of wood. So by the time that you're done, there's really not too much left, except for some of these beautiful leftover areas. I'm also interested in making use of some of these leavings in my increasing interest in three-dimensional work. These are small sculptural pieces that are made out of hollowed out and dried pieces of wood, a variety of different woods from the forest around me. There's birch and larch, and I think a little bit of aspen in these. And then the bottoms are fitted and the green wood shrinks around them to capture that round piece. And the bottom pieces are left over from my print blocks that I've cut out to make those shapes. And when I made those sculptural pieces, they were for an exhibit in Juneau. And my intention all along was to disassemble them and make the elements into individual boxes later. And these are a couple of pieces that were made from the prior piece that you just saw, working with the contrast of black ink on the surface and then some carved and painted yellow cedar on the lids. I often think about aspects of responsibility in terms of materials, and I guess I don't feel like my career comes with a license to do exactly whatever I want, no matter what it takes. I'm trying to think about what I do and what I want to make in ways that are not terribly extravagant or needlessly consumptive, whether that has to do with choices involving scale or the material itself. I've also been thinking a lot about the land that I live on, the history of it, the threats to it, and the idea of stewardship versus ownership. With some of these thoughts in mind, my partner Brandon and I put a large chunk of our property in Goldstream into conservation easements in the hope that it can maintain some of its wilder nature into the future. I'm personally invested in and interested in helping to protect some of the less sexy, possibly more throwaway considered parts of the state, areas with less obvious dramatic beauty, areas that are less pristine. And lately I've been really interested in pushing back against some of the visual mythologies of the state, our often edited view of the landscape. The version of Alaska that I know best is much stranger, much less perfect, more junked up and very real. I think if there's a theme that runs through my way of thinking about place and life, and probably people and politics as well, is that I am willing to be an audience for some of the contradictions and complexity that's often overlooked. More often than we care to admit, there's bad in the good and the other way around, of course. I'm a champion for these harder to love landscapes, places with remnants of human life left on them, the makeshift, the good enough. And I think if there's anyone who's even been tangentially paying attention to conversations around conservation knows that there's a long way to go in repairing some of the errors of the past in the conception and presentation of wilderness, and the idea that these places have never been without people, or these places have ever been without people. Artists are, of course, interested also in what we would consider to be the formal aspects of design, composition and color. And I find that the spaces where the natural and the man-made come together with harmony or with tension give me a lot to explore. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the ways my work functions in the community and in the wider world. I've had the opportunity to travel all over the state through the Artists in the Schools program. And in many ways, that's been one of the most educational and expanding experiences I've ever had. My conception of what Alaska is and who Alaska is made of grew exponentially during the 10 years that I was traveling and teaching actively in this program. And I've also been able to make work on a much grander scale than I could normally justify through the programs that connect artists to make pieces for public buildings. It's always a challenge in competition, conception, and logistics. This piece is in the engineering building at UAF. This is one in a high school in Palmer. And I also enjoy making work specifically for private spaces, for homes. I'm always pleased by the idea of my work as part of the daily lives of people, whether I know them or whether I know them or not. And in some ways, of course, I'm honored and pleased to have work in public collections, but I also like thinking about the idea that all of these people all across the country wake up and live lives alongside work that I've done. Though I'm generally a fairly solitary artist, I've enjoyed the process of collaboration as well, particularly with the ongoing art and science project in a time of change. And we're in the midst of yet another iteration of that project, Boreal Forest Stories. And I believe that the upcoming exhibition will be in May. And I know that some of my fellow participants are attending this lecture. So keep an eye out for that. It's always a really interesting experience, and I think this time in particular will be really invigorating. I'm a strong supporter of the Fairbanks Folk School, their programming and facilities, and I'm often a student and occasionally a teacher. Their courses have helped lead me in new directions, such as going off to Maine to the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship to take a 3-month woodworking class. Here's some other pieces that I made this summer, unfortunately, also no longer with us. Working and learning in different places has been an important part of my activity as an artist from early days. And I try to pursue at least a couple of residencies or projects that take me out of the state and into a new environment every year. There's something really valuable about the change in routine and discovery and elements of discomfort that help to move work and ideas forward. I like to be shaken up a little bit and somewhat forced to interact with new places, new ideas, and new people. I always come out a little bit different and a little bit better for those experiences. Although I can't ever be like some of my art colleagues who have the really interesting lifestyle of more or less living from art residency to art residency, I find it critical for my work to move around, whether through something formal or in this case, something of a self-made residency. I had an invitation from a friend who had a cabin in McCarthy, and she sort of saved my life last summer, or 2 summers ago at the end of our first year of COVID, and said, why don't you come down and stay in my cabin and do some work for a bit? And that was a great break. And I always encourage artists to do their own DIY residencies. Whether or not you can put it on a resume is somewhat immaterial. You still have the experience of making work in a new place. Sometimes the things that I see are just passing through in my own travel. These are a couple of prints that were done about 10 years ago, looking out the window of a train as we went across the High Line between Montana and North Dakota. I came home and turned my sketches into a series of woodcut prints. I've had the opportunity to travel, as Kristen said, to some international residencies. This print was made, although it has nothing to do in subject matter with the place where I was, which was in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I had the good fortune to work in a print shop where I actually had somebody whose job was to help me make my work, which was a novel experience, and got some good work done there. I have been an artist in residence in a number of national parks, which is something that I always encourage other artists to investigate. There are not art residencies in every park, but I believe, and it does change as time goes by, but I believe there are about 50 different programs, and they range from large national parks like Zion and Glacier and Denali to smaller monuments and other properties within the park system. This piece was from residency in Denali in the summer, I believe in about 2008. And of course, as you might expect from seeing my work so far, I'm not one to really engage with the big, broad landscape. I think I make work that sometimes surprises the art residency coordinators a little bit, because you will not get mountains and dramatic views out of me. But this piece has to do with listening to rocks being moved down the Toklat River and trying to give some sort of a visual representation of what that sounded like. I had the good fortune to be in Denali also in their wintertime residency, and I spend a lot of time looking at these little open leads in flowing water in the early spring, which then was translated into some woodcut print collage pieces. 2 summers ago, I was an artist in residence on the Tokut Trail. This is a sketch from the trail. It's a unique partnership between the National Park Service and Parks Canada. And you spend, I'm sure most of you know that the Tokut Trail is not a trail that requires 2 weeks to hike, but you have the opportunity to basically spend 2 nights in every campground along the trail. So lots of time to go back and forth and revisit things. And another fun part of that residency is that you're highly encouraged to bring another person along with you. So I had a friend who came with me and patiently entertained herself while I was off drawing from the landscape. And this is one of my finished pieces from that residency. And another one as well. Again, looking at some of the lesser observed parts of the landscape. This is from Zion, and there was a big rainstorm, one of their flash flood events, not a particularly dangerous or dramatic one, but I liked looking at all of the things that were caught in the branches afterwards along the Virgin River. And most recently, just about a week and a half ago, I returned from a artist in the parks residency in Acadia National Park in Maine, which was fascinating. This between the summer and this residency, that was the first time I've ever been in the Northeast. So I've had quite a substantial introduction to Maine. There's a lot that I still would like to learn and come to understand about it, but I was of course, fascinated by the shoreline and the skeletons of the sea urchins left on the beaches and in the rocks, and the combination of the power of the ocean and the rocky shores, yet these incredibly delicate things somehow make it up on the beach and survive. I think I would like to mention at least a little bit, and Kristen asked me to say something about this. This is a piece called Fort in a Fire, which might be a little bit prescient. This was, I don't collect my own work, but a few years ago, my friend Cass Woodward was talking about how he had been encouraged by his late wife, Missy, to put some of his favorite pieces aside for his own collection. And that was something that he had started to do. And I thought, well, I probably should do that. So I had a few things that I had selected out. And unfortunately, this was one of them. I had a very unfortunate accident mid-September. I'd come home from my woodworking class and just started to unpack my shop, and had plugged in the battery of an electric bike that I'd had for a number of years on my porch, and unwisely went off to meet a friend at the university to go for a run. And about an hour later, I got a call from the fire department saying that the studio was, I don't even know if it was actively on fire by that point, but basically it was on the ground and you need to come home now. I think there is a little bit of, well, there's irony in a number of things, but I have been thinking a bit about the strangeness of acquiring a piece of equipment that I thought was going to be helpful in decreasing my environmental footprint by getting me out of my car a bit more. And that the result of that decision, the unintended consequence, was putting 13 tons of debris into a landfill. If anything makes you feel like your environmental efforts are somewhat futile, this would be one experience. As a person who has a hard time throwing away a glass jar, this is all quite a lot to come to terms with, and I will be for quite some time. And not to end my slide presentation on a negative or sad note, I will say that I've always thought that if you're going to have something bad happen to you, Fairbanks is a really excellent place to have it happen, because this community is extraordinarily caring and generous and supportive. And I have been held up and supported in ways that I could never have thought to ask for. And I have every reason to expect that in time, and it will take probably more time than any of us want, that this will be okay and the studio will be rebuilt on our property. But for the time being, I have just signed a lease in the old Raven Cross Country storefront down in Mark Fage's building on Well Street. So I'll be a little bit more accessible. There's that. And I'm hoping possibly by the spring to be able to have some sort of a open studio. And wouldn't it be nice if that could coincide with a little bit of an ease in COVID and we could all celebrate getting started together. And that's about all that I have for you here in terms of a presentation. And I'm happy to answer some questions or talk a little more, whatever you want.
All right. Oops, I think I accidentally just muted you. I meant to unmute everyone, but thank you so much, Sarah. Wow, that was such an honor to hear from you. And yeah, that was incredible. If anyone has, oh yeah, go ahead, take yourself off mute if you can, so we can keep hearing from you. Let's see.
Mute.
There we go. You're back.
There we go. Okay, thanks.
Wonderful. Okay, well, any questions for Sarah? I know I have a few. Yeah, Sharice, go ahead, take yourself off mute.
Sarah, I would love to know what your favorite national park that you've done a residency in is. I know you've done so many.
Well, it hasn't been that many. It's 7, I think. But my, I would say that my favorite was probably Isle Royal because it was very much, it was very familiar. The landscape has some definite similarities to Alaska, but you didn't have to worry about bears. And that was extraordinarily liberating just to be able to, I remember the rangers told me, well, you should keep your food in your tent. And I thought, wow, that's kind of incredible. I felt like I was just sort of at an art summer camp. Nothing to worry about. Yeah, it was great.
Thanks.
I was going to ask, so you said you signed a lease at Raven Studio, is that right? Does that have
It's the if you're new to Fairbanks,
Yeah.
you probably don't know, but there was a ski shop in a building down on Well Street, and I'm in the same space. It's a building that has artist studios and other businesses in it near Well Street Art Company.
Wonderful. Okay, that's really good to hear. I know though that in your studio you had a lot of equipment. Do you have the tools you need, or have you been working on acquiring those again?
It's going to be a very long process. I had a lot of really specialized equipment, and you gather stuff together. It had been about 25 years of building up and finding the equipment and tools that I needed. So I'm trying to take it one step at a time. There's nothing in the world that I hate more than shopping for things. So there's that aspect to it. And yeah, so I've broken it down into a few different areas. And right now I'm trying to get enough together to get my stuff together to do some simple woodworking and wood carving. And then maybe in December, I'll start dealing with the printmaking aspect of it. But it's going to be a long time before I really feel like I have what I need to do everything I want to do.
Yeah, Erica.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really powerful. And I'm really interested in how you spoke about I think, dual mandates of a lot of artists feel are put upon you to be political or to be truthful. I know you said it differently, but I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to how you see that contradiction happening, or where you see like non-truthfulness coming out in overtly political art. I'm very interested in that. I'm stepping outside of my role in the Northern Center a little bit, but I live with this question in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of us here do as I scroll through who's on this call. So I'm just fascinated by that and your thinking on it.
Well, I think oh, what do I think? I think I said most of what I'm willing to say about it. I guess I'll say that sometimes I will look at what gets a lot of attention and praise in what I would call the big fancy art world. And I see things like, well, let's ship a iceberg from Antarctica to France and let it melt in the street. And okay, is the profundity of that statement worth the actual cost of what it took to make that happen? Or I do sometimes see work where I feel like, artists are basically doing what they want to do, and then you tack some reference in your statement onto climate change, and then, then you've checked all those boxes. And at the same time, there is plenty of work out there that's really good and really well thought out and very profound. And I know some of those artists are on this call right now. And I definitely do not want to give the impression that I'm painting things with a broad brush. But, you know, for me, I'm an object maker. I'm interested in beauty. I think there is still a place for that in the world. And those, again, those two things don't necessarily contradict each other. You can have very beautiful work that is political and profound. It just is not, generally speaking, what works for me. And when I try to force my work into those channels, once in a while it's effective. I can think of maybe 2 pieces that I've made in the past 25 years that have had a more overt message-driven nature to them. Most of the rest of them, no one will ever see because they have been destroyed. So, you know, we do have to be true to who we are. And for me, those 2 things. I was really comforted. I listened to a podcast called The Conversation, and there was a Canadian art historian who was talking about how basically it's better to do good work than to do work that serves those sorts of purposes. Anyway, feel free to argue with me. I don't claim to be right about this or anything. Yeah.
Thank you.
Jenny, did you have a question?
Yes. Hi, Sarah. It's lovely to meet you. Can you say, maybe I got on late because I always have computer problems. I live on the East Coast in Maryland, and Alaska is my favorite place in the world. And I come whenever possible. And I was in Denali in June. It was fabulous. Can you say more about your training and where you went to school? Are you a native Alaskan? How did you learn to do what you do?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I grew up in Fairbanks. My family moved here when I was 2. And I went through high school in the public schools here in Fairbanks. And then my college and graduate school education is in the Midwest in Iowa and Nebraska. I didn't get around to the idea that maybe I could be an artist or make art until about halfway through college, which was awfully inconvenient. But I managed to get through that process, and pretty much at the same time fell in love with printmaking and went off to the MFA program at the University of Nebraska and studied under a fabulous woodblock printmaker. And I think that influenced my interest in wood as a medium and my decision to pursue that. And fairly shortly after graduate school, I spent a couple of years in Montana doing a kind of a long-term art residency, and then decided I wanted to give this a try in Fairbanks. And at the time I thought, well, I'm young enough. If this doesn't work out fairly quickly, I will get myself off to someplace that's more obviously conducive to being an artist. And, you know, 20 some years later, I'm still here. So I guess, you know, it has its ups and downs, but it seems to be working out okay. So I think I'll stay.
And how wonderful that you were supported by Fairbanks and the small community when tragedy struck.
Very
There's
fortunate.
so much to be said for community and support for creators. We're all creators, I think, and you really need support for that. So I'm glad you were among family and friends when it happened.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Frank or Judy.
This is Frank. I was wondering, Sarah, if your creative muse happens like snapping your fingers and all of a sudden it's there, or if it's like you often said, a work and it's over a protracted time that your works are created.
I think it's more over time and just through the habit of doing things. I tend to be a pretty steady worker. And oh, I'll probably say it wrong, but there's a wonderful book of essays by Ann Patchett called I can't remember. No, the book is called This is the Story of a Happy Marriage, but the essay is called The Getaway Car. And it's more about writing, but I think the experience is clearly relates to artists too. And she said something along the lines of, I'd far rather have a mentor who showed me that the way forward is to hoist the pick rather than listen for the muse. And I'm definitely of the hoist the pick mentality. I'm a bit of a workhorse and just keep plugging away at things. I'm not sure I'd recognize the muse if the muse showed up.
Thank you.
So before your talk, I was learning more about wood block print and practiced a little bit. And it's actually, in my very limited experience, really difficult to keep the paint where I want it to. And I was looking at some of your wonderful close-up pictures of your work. And how do you, like, I guess, when you're painting something that's carved, how do you keep the paint from getting into all those little holes and pockets and tool marks? Or if you do, how do you remove that paint? Do you have a solvent or something? Kind of a technical question.
No, unfortunately, I wish I did. It would be much easier if I could just paint over the whole surface and wipe something off. And believe me, I've tried to make that work. I just have a lot of little brushes and fairly steady hands, knock on wood, at least so far at this point in time. I did see someone sent me a link to a video of another person who was making some carved and painted pieces, and that person did the carving, applied the color, and then rolled black on the high surfaces. So any paint that got slopped into the wrong spots, it would get covered up by the black. And I thought, oh, that's really much smarter way to do this. But I'm too hooked on the method that I've developed, so I probably will never try it. But I thought that was interesting.
Wow.
Could I ask another quick follow-up question? Could you say something more about the work that you have that's part of the auction for the Northern Center? Some of the background for it, or something that we might think about as we think about bidding for it?
I would say that these are both pieces from my immediate surroundings. They're things that I see where I live every day. The cotton grass grows in the trails in my backyard. There are some small burned areas in Goldstream Valley up in the hills. I guess that's not on my property, but places that I go to look at from time to time. And I guess the thing that I was thinking about when I made them was the idea that you don't have to travel far to have a travel experience. I have some issues with Wendell Berry, but I do like his poem about traveling at home, that you can make that experience of finding new things to look at for yourself without having to get on an airplane or jump in your car. And I thought that was, I don't know, somewhat connected to what the Northern Center is about.
Thank you.
Right. I think that's about all the time we have for questions. And thank you so much, Sarah. It's been really an honor to talk with you. I'm going to end the recording now.